In the hushed, gilded sanctuary of New York's most exclusive restaurant, where power is the main currency and money is just a whisper, a young waitress moved like a ghost among titans. She was invisible, a mere functionary in their world of billion-dollar deals and casual cruelty. But on this particular evening, two men dripping with arrogance and wealth decided to use a foreign language as their private weapon, mocking the quiet girl serving their vintage wine. They believed she was nothing. They believed they were untouchable. They were about to discover that some secrets don't stay buried and the most devastating truths can be delivered in perfect fluent German. The air in Ethelgard's was thick with the scent of old money and new ambition. It was a carefully curated atmosphere, from the deep burgundy of the velvet banquettes to the soft golden glow of the crystal chandeliers that hung like frozen constellations. Here conversations were held in hushed tones, the clinking of crystal silverware against porcelain, the only sharp sound permitted to pierce the bubble of extreme privilege. For the patrons, it was a fortress of solitude from the chaotic city outside. For the staff, it was a gilded cage where they performed a silent nightly ballet of service, their own lives and identities checked at the door, along with the fur coats and briefcases. Anneliese Schmidt was a master of this ballet. At 26, she possessed a poise that belied her years and her station. Her movements were economical and graceful as she navigated the narrow channels between tables, her back straight, her expression a serene mask of professional neutrality. She could decant a 1982 Chateau Margaux without spilling a drop, describe the flavor profile of the pan-seared scallops with truffle foam in 3 different languages, if required, and anticipate a diner's need for a water refill before they were consciously aware of it themselves. To the clientele of Ethelgard's, she was simply the waitress, a pleasant, efficient, and utterly forgettable fixture of the scenery. No one saw the shadows behind her calm grey eyes. No one knew that the hands that so deftly cleared away their plates had once held a scholarship to Heidelberg University, one of Germany's most prestigious institutions. No one could guess that her mind, currently occupied with memorizing the evening specials, had once grappled with complex macroeconomic theories and dissected dense financial reports with an acumen that had made her professors mark her as a prodigy. That life felt like a dream, belonging to someone else. It had shattered 3 years ago, the day her father, a brilliant but trusting biochemist named Dr. Alistair Schmidt, had called her in tears. His small, innovative company, Schmidt Biosolutions, a firm built on a revolutionary water purification technology he had poured his soul into, had been gutted in a hostile takeover. The investors, a ruthless private equity firm, had used predatory tactics, exploiting legal loopholes, and manufacturing a crisis of confidence that sent his company's value plummeting. They bought it for pennies on the dollar, stripped its assets, sold off the patents, and left her father with nothing but crushing debt and a broken heart. The shock had triggered a massive stroke, leaving Alistair partially paralyzed and needing round-the-clock care. Anneliese had abandoned her doctoral studies in Germany, without a second thought returning to the US to become his primary caregiver. The mountain of medical bills and the debt from the corporate sabotage had forced her into a life she never envisioned. Ethelgard's, with its high-paying clientele and generous tips, was the best she could do without a recent resume, or the time for a conventional career. It was a means to an end, a penance, a way to keep her father comfortable in a decent care facility. Every night she locked her past away in a small locker in the staff room next to a worn-out copy of Keynes's The General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money. She put on her starched uniform, smoothed her blonde hair into a tight bun, and became the ghost of Ethelgard's. tonight, the ghost was about to be seen. They arrived at precisely 8 o'clock, sweeping into the restaurant with an invisible wave of entitlement that parted the air before them. The man in the lead was Harrison Blackwood, a name synonymous with corporate raiding and unimaginable wealth. He was in his late 50s with a mane of silver hair, a face that looked chiseled from granite, and eyes the color of a winter sky, cold and appraising. He moved with the predatory grace of a shark, his custom-tailored suit a dark armor that screamed power. Trailing a step behind him was his associate, a younger, leaner man named Garrett Vance. Garrett had the eager, slightly anxious look of a courtier desperate to please his king. He laughed a little too loudly at Harrison's quips and scanned every room as if assessing its value and threat level simultaneously. The maître de Monsieur Dubois, a man who prided himself on his unflappable demeanor, seemed to shrink in their presence, his usual Gallic charm replaced by a fawning deference. "Mr. Blackwood, a pleasure. Your usual table is ready." "It had better be Dubois." Harrison rumbled, his voice low and resonant, not even bothering to make eye contact. They were seated in Annalise's section at the prime corner table, with a panoramic view of the city lights. It was a table reserved for the gods of this world, and tonight Harrison Blackwood was Zeus. Annalise approached with the water carafe, her face a perfect portrait of polite subservience. "Good evening, gentlemen. May I offer you still or sparkling water?" Harrison waved a dismissive hand, already deep in conversation with Garrett. Garrett was the one who answered, "Sparkling, 2 bottles of the San Pellegrino." Annalise inclined her head and retreated. As she poured the water, she couldn't help but overhear their conversation, conducted in English for now. It was about a recent acquisition, a tech startup they had, streamlined to, which Annalise knew was corporate speak for firing half its workforce. The board was sentimental. Harrison was saying, a smirk playing on his lips. They talked about innovation and company culture. I told them culture doesn't show up on a balance sheet. We sold their server division to a competitor for a 50% profit in 3 weeks. End of story. Garrett chuckled. A masterclass, Harrison. Truly. Annalise placed the menus before them. "My name is Annalise, and I will be your server this evening. Our specials include a wild mushroom risotto with white truffle and a Dover sole meunière prepared tableside." Harrison Blackwood finally looked at her. His gaze wasn't one of acknowledgement, but of appraisal, the way one might inspect a piece of furniture. His eyes swept over her from head to toe, lingering for a fraction of a second too long, a flicker of something cold and dismissive in their depths. He said nothing to her, instead turning to Garrett, and then the language changed. "Sie Sie dir an," Harrison began in crisp, clear German, his tone shifting to one of casual conspiracy. "Look at her." Annalise's hands didn't tremble as she placed the breadbasket on the table. Her posture remained ramrod straight. Inside her, however, a switch flipped. A deep primal instinct for stillness took over the kind a forest creature adopts when it senses a predator nearby. Garrett, clearly fluent himself, leaned in with a conspiratorial grin. "Eine hübsche kleine Kellnerin. Bestimmt nicht die hellste Kerze auf der Torte." A pretty little waitress, certainly not the sharpest tool in the shed. Annalise straightened up her face, still a placid mask. "Can I interest you gentlemen in a cocktail or a selection from our wine list before your meal?" she asked in perfect English, her voice calm and even. Harrison ignored her question, taking a sip of his water. He looked out the window, then back at Garrett, continuing in German, as if she weren't there. "Das ist das, was ich an Orten wie diesem liebe. Der Service ist anonym. Man kann über alles reden. Sie sind nur Teil der Einrichtung. This is what I love about places like this. The service is anonymous. You can talk about anything. They are just part of the furniture. Annalise felt a slow burn begin in her chest. It was an old familiar feeling, the sting of being underestimated, of being rendered invisible. But this was different. It was cruder, more personal. She was not just a server. She was an object of their private amusement. She stood by the table waiting a silent statue of service. She had to. Her father's care depended on this job, on the tips from men exactly like this. She could endure it. She had endured worse. But the night was young, and Harrison Blackwood was just getting started. He had no idea that the furniture he was speaking about was not only listening, but understanding every single venomous word. And he had no idea he was about to bring up the one topic in the world that could make her break her silence. The ordering process was a display of casual dominance. Harrison Blackwood didn't consult the menu so much as command it. We'll start with the oysters Rockefeller and the steak tartare, then 2 bone-in ribeyes medium rare, and bring the 05 Petrus. Don't bother me with the tasting, just decant it properly. He waved his hand, dismissing her again. The Petrus alone was a $5,000 bottle of wine. For them it was an afterthought. Annalise retrieved the bottle from the cellar, her hands moving with practiced precision. The weight of the bottle felt obscene in her grip. It represented nearly 2 months of her father's care facility fees. As she presented the bottle to Harrison for inspection, he glanced at the label and nodded curtly, before turning back to Garrett, resuming their conversation in German. Also zurück zu North Star. Garrett said, his voice lowered slightly, but still perfectly audible to Annalise as she began the careful ritual of decanting the wine. So back to North Star. Annalise's blood ran cold. North Star. It was the internal project name, the code name the equity firm had used for their acquisition of her father's company. She had seen it on the few documents her father's lawyer had managed to salvage from the wreckage, a name that was seared into her memory, a brand of pure poison. Her heart began to hammer against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat beneath her calm exterior. She kept her eyes down, focused on the steady stream of ruby-red wine pouring into the crystal decanter, her breathing measured. She couldn't react. She wouldn't. North Star was a thing of beauty. Harrison mused a cruel nostalgia in his voice. He swirled the wine Garrett had poured for him, inhaling its aroma. Der alte Narr Schmidt, hat uns alles geglaubt. The old fool Schmidt, he believed everything we told him. Annalise flinched. The insult was so direct, so personal, it was like a physical blow. Old fool. He was talking about her father, her brilliant, gentle, trusting father, the man who read poetry to her at night and taught her how to identify constellations, the man whose life's work was now being mocked over a $5,000 bottle of wine by the very monster who had destroyed him. Garrett laughed, a sycophantic, ugly sound. Sprach immer von ethischen Verpflichtungen und dem Wohl der Menschheit, als ob das Rechnungen bezahlen würde. He was always talking about ethical obligations and the good of humanity, as if that pays the bills. Exactly, Harrison affirmed, leaning back in his chair. We created the narrative. A few whispers to the right journalists about cash flow problems, a fabricated internal report leaked to his key investors suggesting the purification tech was unstable. Classic fear-mongering. By the time we made our offer, they were so panicked they practically paid us to take the company off their hands. The restaurant, the clinking of plates, the soft murmur of other conversations. It all faded away. Annalise was trapped in a horrifying bubble with these 2 men forced to listen to a live recounting of her family's ruin. She could picture it all, her father pacing his office, his face etched with worry as the calls came in, his trust in his partners, eroding his dream, turning into a nightmare. These men hadn't just bought a company, they had orchestrated a man's collapse. The best part, Garrett added, his eyes gleaming with admiration, was using his own head of R&D against him. What was his name? Peterson. Peterson, Harrison confirmed with a smirk. We promised him a seat on the board of the new shell company. All he had to do was fudge the data on the long-term viability tests. The idiot signed an affidavit saying the tech had a critical flaw that would emerge after 5 years. It was a complete lie, of course, but it was the nail in the coffin. Schmidt's credibility was shot. Annalise remembered Dr. Peterson, a man her father had mentored for a decade, treated like a son. The betrayal had hurt him more than the financial loss. She finished decanting the wine, her movements robotic. She poured a small amount into Harrison's glass, and then Garrett's, her face, an unreadable mask of professional stone. But inside, a glacial rage was forming, solidifying the grief and helplessness she had felt for 3 long years into something hard and sharp. They had moved on from appetizers and were now waiting for their steaks, the wine flowing freely. Harrison was becoming more expansive, more arrogant with every sip. He gestured toward Annalise with his glass as she refilled his water. Schau sie dir an, wie sie herumschwebt. He slurred slightly. Look at her, how she hovers. Keine Ahnung, was für Gespräche direkt vor ihrer Nase stattfinden. Das Gehirn einer Goldfischs in einem hübschen Paket. Wahrscheinlich ist ihre größte Sorge im Leben, ob sie genug Trinkgeld für ihre Miete bekommt. No idea what kind of conversations are happening right under her nose. The brain of a goldfish in a pretty package. Her biggest worry in life is probably whether she'll make enough tip money for her rent. Garrett snickered into his napkin. Weniger Sorgen, mehr Glück, nehme ich an. Less worry, more happiness, I suppose. That was it. The condescension, the cruelty, the utter dehumanization. It wasn't just about her father anymore. It was about her and every person like her who worked tirelessly to be invisible for the comfort of men like Harrison Blackwood. The patronizing assumption that her life was small, her mind empty, her worries trivial. All the suppressed pain, the abandoned dreams, the quiet fury of the last 3 years coalesced into a single point of incandescent clarity. She had nothing left to lose. Her father was gone. The stroke had taken his life 6 months ago, a fact that made their current mockery feel like a desecration of his memory. This job was just a cage, and Harrison Blackwood had just handed her the key. The steaks arrived, carried by another server, but Annalise stepped forward to place them on the table. She set Harrison's plate down first, then Garrett's. Her hands were perfectly steady. She didn't retreat. She stood straight, her chin up, and looked Harrison Blackwood directly in the eye. For the first time all evening, he was forced to truly see her not as a function, but as a person. He frowned, annoyed by her presence. "Is there a problem?" he asked in English, his tone sharp with irritation. Annalise took a slow, deep breath, letting it out gently. She felt a strange, terrifying calm settle over her. It was the calm of a captain about to scuttle his own ship to take down the enemy flagship with it. She met his cold gaze and held it. Then, in flawless academic German, tinged with the faint, educated accent of the Heidelberg region, her voice low, but carrying the cold, clear authority of a judge, she spoke. "Es gibt in der Tat ein Problem, Herr Blackwood." There is indeed a problem, Mr. Blackwood. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. Harrison Blackwood froze mid-motion, his fork hovering over his perfectly cooked steak. The smug, wine-flushed confidence drained from his face, replaced by a wave of pure, unadulterated shock. His jaw went slack. His cold blue eyes, which had held nothing but dismissive arrogance all evening, now widened in stunned disbelief. He looked as if the marble statue in the corner had just leaned over and asked him for the time. Garrett Vance choked on his wine. He sputtered, coughing into his napkin, his face turning a blotchy red. He stared at Annalise, then at Harrison, then back at Annalise, his mind visibly failing to compute what was happening. The silence at their table was suddenly a vacuum, pulling in the ambient sounds of the restaurant. Annalise didn't waver. She held Harrison's gaze, her own eyes, like chips of grey flint. She had his full, undivided attention. For the first time, he was seeing her, really seeing her. And he was terrified. She continued in the same calm, lethal German. Zuerst möchte ich einen kleinen grammatikalischen Punkt korrigieren. Man sagt nicht das Gehirn einer Goldfischs. Der Genitiv von Goldfisch ist des Goldfisches. Wenn Sie schon jemanden in einer Sprache beleidigen wollen, die Sie für überlegen halten, sollten Sie zumindest die Grundlagen beherrschen. First, I'd like to correct a small point of grammar. One doesn't say the brain of a goldfish's. The genitive of goldfish is des Goldfisches. If you're going to insult someone in a language you believe makes you superior, you should at least master the basics. It was a surgeon's cut, precise, devastating, and utterly unexpected. She hadn't just revealed that she understood. She had asserted her intellectual superiority in the very language he had used as a shield. Garrett looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. Harrison, however, was recovering from the initial shock, his expression hardening into a mask of fury. The blood was returning to his face, suffusing it with a dangerous mottled purple. "Who the hell do you think you are?" he snarled, switching back to English, his voice a low growl. Annalise did not switch back. She stayed in German, forcing him to meet her on her chosen ground. "Where ich bin?" she asked, a sad, ironic smile touching her lips for a fleeting moment. "Ich bin diejenige, deren größte Sorge weit über das Trinkgeld für die Miete hinausgeht, obwohl das dank Ihnen tatsächlich eine Sorge ist. Ich bin diejenige, deren Goldfischgehirn Magna Cum Laude in Wirtschaftswissenschaften an der Universität Heidelberg abgeschlossen hat. Who am I? I am the one whose biggest worry extends far beyond tip money for rent, though thanks to you, that is indeed a concern. I am the one whose goldfish brain graduated Magna Cum Laude in economics from Heidelberg University." She took a small step closer, her voice dropping even lower, making it more intense, more personal. Aber das ist nicht der Grund, warum Sie sich erinnern sollten. Sie sollten sich an einen anderen Namen erinnern. Einen Namen, den Sie als den alten Narren bezeichnet haben. But that's not the name you should remember. You should remember another name. A name you referred to as the old fool. She let the words hang in the air for a beat, watching the dawning horror, and then finally recognition in Harrison's eyes. He knew. He was connecting the dots. Her accent, her fluency, her presence here. "My name ist Annalise Schmidt," she said, her voice vibrating with 3 years of suppressed grief and rage. "Dr. Alistair Schmidt war mein Vater." If her first words had been a slap, these were a battering ram. Harrison Blackwood physically recoiled in his seat. The name spoken aloud confirmed his worst fear. This wasn't a random coincidence. This was a reckoning. The hushed elegance of Ethelgard's had evaporated. Diners at nearby tables had fallen silent. Their forks paused. Their heads turned. They might not have understood the German, but they understood the universal language of confrontation. They saw the powerful billionaire shrinking in his seat, and the quiet waitress standing over him like an avenging angel. Annalise wasn't finished. The dam had broken, and the words poured out not in a torrent of anger, but in a controlled, chillingly precise indictment. Sie haben über North Star gesprochen, she continued in German, her eyes locked on his. Ich habe jedes Wort gehört. Wie Sie die Lügen über die Instabilität der Technologie verbreitet haben. Wie Sie Dr. Peterson, den Mann, den mein Vater wie einen Sohn behandelt hat, dazu gebracht haben, seine Forschung zu verraten. Wie Sie sich damit gebrüstet haben, ihn mit einem wertlosen Vorstandssitz in einer Scheinfirma bestochen zu haben. Sie haben nicht nur sein Unternehmen gestohlen, Herr Blackwood, Sie haben seinen Geist gebrochen. You spoke of North Star. I heard every word. How you spread the lies about the technology's instability. How you got Dr. Peterson, the man my father treated like a son, to betray his research. How you bragged about bribing him with a worthless board seat in a shell company. You didn't just steal his company, Mr. Blackwood. You broke his spirit. Her voice trembled for the first time, but she mastered it instantly. Der Schlaganfall, den erlitt, eine Woche, nachdem sie die letzte Unterschrift erzwungen hatten, war kein Zufall. Ihr feindliches Übernahmeverfahren war ein Todesurteil. Sie saßen hier und tranken seinen Gegenwert in Wein, während sie über die Zerstörung seines Lebens lachten. Er ist vor 6 Monaten gestorben. Ich hoffe, der Wein hat Ihnen geschmeckt. The stroke he suffered 1 week after you forced the final signature was not a coincidence. Your hostile takeover was a death sentence. You sat here drinking its equivalent value in wine while you laughed about destroying his life. He died 6 months ago. I hope you enjoyed the wine. The final sentence, delivered with icy finality, hung in the air like a shard of glass. Harrison was speechless. He was completely exposed, his vile conversation laid bare. He looked around wildly, seeing the curious and judgmental eyes of his peers upon him. The carefully constructed facade of the untouchable Titan had been shattered by a waitress in a hushed restaurant. Garrett, pale as a sheet, finally found his voice, stammering in English. Now see here. There's no need for this. This is a private conversation. Anneliese turned her cold gaze on him. Es war keine private Unterhaltung, she shot back in German. Es war eine öffentliche Zurschaustellung von Arroganz, und jetzt ist es eine öffentliche Zurschaustellung der Wahrheit. It wasn't a private conversation. It was a public display of arrogance, and now it's a public display of truth. She straightened up her duty, done the rage inside her, replaced by a vast, aching emptiness. She reverted to English, her voice crisp and professional, the mask of the server clicking back into place one last time. It was the most powerful move she could make. Will there be anything else? Gentlemen. Harrison Blackwood finally surged to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the polished floor. His face was a thunderous mask of fury and humiliation. You're fired, he bellowed, pointing a trembling finger at her. You'll never work in this city again. Before Anneliese could respond, Monsieur Dubois materialized at her side. He had heard the commotion and seen the entire exchange. He looked at the trembling, furious billionaire, then at the impossibly composed waitress, and at the dozen pairs of eyes from the city's elite watching him. He made a calculation. Mr. Blackwood. Dubois said, his voice firm, his French accent thick with authority. Mademoiselle Schmidt is my employee, not yours. And in my establishment, we do not tolerate the abuse of our staff. Perhaps it is you who should leave. The collective gasp from the surrounding tables was audible. Dubois had just chosen a waitress over one of his wealthiest patrons. Anneliese took a small black leather billfold from her apron pocket. With a steady hand, she placed it on the table next to Harrison's uneaten steak. Your check, Mr. Blackwood, she said, her voice even, including the Petrus. It was the ultimate act of defiance. She wasn't just exposing him, she was serving him the bill for it. Harrison stared at the bill, then at Annalise, his mouth opening and closing like a landed fish. Defeated, humiliated, and utterly silenced, he threw some cash onto the table, grabbed his coat, and stormed out of the restaurant, Garrett scurrying behind him like a chastened dog. The moment they were gone, a strange thing happened. A ripple of soft, spontaneous applause broke out from the surrounding tables. It wasn't loud or boisterous, but it was unmistakable. It was a murmur of support, of respect, a quiet acknowledgement of courage in a place where it was so rarely seen. Annalise simply nodded, a silent thank you to the anonymous faces. Then she turned and walked, not ran toward the sanctuary of the staff exit, the gilded cage's door finally open. The moment the swinging kitchen doors closed behind her, Annalise's composure crumbled. She leaned against the cool stainless steel wall, her legs suddenly feeling like water. Her breath came in ragged, shuddering gasps. The adrenaline that had fueled her righteous fury drained away, leaving behind the profound, bone-deep exhaustion of a soldier after a long and brutal war. The victory felt hollow, overshadowed by the fresh wave of grief that washed over her. She had spoken the truth. She had avenged her father's memory in some small way, but it wouldn't bring him back. Tears she hadn't allowed herself to shed for months streamed silently down her cheeks, not of sadness, but of pure cathartic release. Her colleagues, the other waiters and kitchen staff who had witnessed the tail end of the confrontation through the porthole window of the door, kept a respectful distance. They saw her tears not as weakness, but as the aftermath of a monumental display of strength. The head chef, a burly man named Antoine, quietly placed a glass of water on a nearby prep counter for her. It was a small gesture of solidarity in their shared world of service. A few minutes later, Monsieur Dubois entered the kitchen. His face, usually a mask of professional stress, was uncharacteristically gentle. He approached Annalise cautiously. "Mademoiselle Schmidt," he began softly. "Annalise, are you all right?" She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and straightened up, trying to regain a semblance of professionalism. "I apologize, Monsieur Dubois. I lost my composure. I understand if you have to let me go. I will clear out my locker." Dubois held up a hand. "Let you go, Annalise, what you did. It took a courage I have not seen in a very long time. That man Blackwood, he is a bully who believes his money makes him a king. Tonight you showed him he is just a man. A cruel one at that." He sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "I will not lie to you. He will likely try to cause problems for this restaurant. He is powerful. But Ethel Guards has a reputation that predates Harrison Blackwood, and it will endure long after he is forgotten. My reputation, however, would not survive if I fired an employee for defending her dignity and her family's honor." He paused, his expression serious. "You have a home here for as long as you want it. Take the rest of the night off. Go home and rest." Annalise was stunned. In a world where the customer was always right, especially a customer who could buy and sell the entire block, her manager had chosen to stand by her. "Thank you, monsieur," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "It means more than you know." As she gathered her things from her locker, her worn-out purse, her coat, and the old economics textbook, she felt a profound shift in her own perception. She had walked into work that evening as a ghost resigned to her fate. She was walking out as Annalise Schmidt, daughter of Alistair Schmidt, a woman who had spoken truth to power and had not been struck down. The story, however, didn't end when she walked out the door. Unbeknownst to anyone at the time, One of the patrons who had witnessed the entire drama was Evelyn Reed, a senior investigative journalist for the New York Chronicle. She had been dining with an off-the-record source, but the scene at Blackwood's table had quickly become the only story in the room. Evelyn, who had a nose for hypocrisy and a deep-seated dislike for corporate predators, had recorded the last part of the exchange on her phone, capturing Blackwood's furious exit and the subsequent applause. She didn't understand the German, but she understood the power dynamics. She spent the next hour discreetly interviewing 2 other diners and a busboy piecing together the narrative. She had the names Harrison Blackwood and Anneliese Schmidt. By the time Anneliese was on the subway home, her story was already taking on a life of its own. The next morning, it broke. Evelyn Reed's article was published on the front page of the Chronicle's digital edition under a blaring headline, "The Billionaire and the Waitress of Ethelgard's How a Secret Conversation in German exposed the rotten heart of a corporate raider." The article was a masterpiece of narrative journalism. It detailed the scene at the restaurant with cinematic flair, contrasted Blackwood's immense wealth with Annaliese's quiet dignity, and most importantly, Evelyn had done her homework overnight. She had cross-referenced North Star and Schmidt and uncovered the basic details of the hostile takeover of Schmidt Biosolutions. She painted a devastating picture of a brilliant scientist being ruined by a heartless predator. The story of Anneliese the prodigy, forced to become a waitress to care for her dying father, was the emotional core that made the story explode. By 9:00 a.m., Ethelgard's Waitress was trending on social media. The story was everywhere. It was the perfect David and Goliath tale for the digital age. People shared it with furious comments about corporate greed and heartfelt praise for Annaliese's bravery. Someone dug up her academic records from Heidelberg, confirming her story. A picture of her father, Dr. Alistair Schmidt, accepting an award for innovation, began to circulate. The fallout for Harrison Blackwood was immediate and catastrophic. The stock price of his flagship firm, Blackwood Capital, began to nosedive as soon as the market opened. His board of directors, the same people who had applauded his ruthless tactics in private, were now terrified of the public relations nightmare. The story wasn't just about him being a jerk in a restaurant. It was about the fraudulent methods he'd used in the North Star acquisition. The mention of a bribed researcher and a fabricated report about the tech's viability caught the attention of more than just the public. It caught the attention of the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC. Garrett Vance was the first casualty. He was fired before lunch, a sacrificial lamb offered up in a desperate attempt to contain the damage. Blackwood issued a half-hearted, lawyer-vetted apology for his inappropriate language, which the public immediately tore apart as insincere. For Anneliese, the day was a surreal whirlwind. Her phone, a cheap prepaid device, buzzed incessantly with calls and texts from numbers she didn't recognize. Reporters camped outside her small apartment building. She stayed inside watching the story unfold on her laptop, feeling detached, as if she were reading about someone else. Then, late in the afternoon, an email arrived that cut through the noise. The sender was Robert Chen, the CEO of Phoenix Holdings, a rival investment firm known for its focus on sustainable and ethical ventures. Chen had been a long-time admirer of her father's work and had even tried to partner with Schmidt Biosolutions years ago, before Blackwood had swept in. The email was brief and to the point. Subject your father's legacy. Dear Ms. Schmidt, I have just read the story in the Chronicle. I knew your father, and I know what the world lost when his work was dismantled. What you did last night took incredible courage. But what interests me more is the intellect that was so clear in your takedown of Mr. Blackwood. My firm Phoenix Holdings is launching a new division focused on identifying and funding socially responsible technological innovation, exactly the kind of work your father championed. We need someone to lead it. Someone with a background in economics, an understanding of technology, and an unimpeachable moral compass. This is not a gesture of pity. This is a job offer. I believe you are the most qualified person for this role. If you are interested, my door is always open. Sincerely, Robert Chen. Annalise read the email 3 times. Her hands trembled, but this time it wasn't from fear or shock. It was from hope, a fragile, unfamiliar tendril of hope rising from the ashes of her past. This wasn't just a job. It was a chance to reclaim her own future and to continue her father's legacy in a way she never thought possible. The echo of her words at Ethelgard's hadn't just torn down a bully. It had built her a bridge to a new life. 1 week after the incident at Ethelgard's, the world had irrevocably shifted for both Annalise Schmidt and Harrison Blackwood. For Blackwood, the descent was swift and brutal. The SEC launched a formal investigation into the North Star acquisition, citing Evelyn Reed's article. Dr. Peterson, the researcher Blackwood had bribed, saw the writing on the wall. Faced with potential federal charges, he agreed to cooperate fully with investigators, providing evidence of the fabricated reports and the terms of his illicit deal with Blackwood Capital. The scandal was no longer a matter of public opinion. It was a matter of criminal inquiry. Blackwood was forced to step down as CEO, his name, now a toxic asset. The empire he had built on fear and intimidation was crumbling under the weight of a single truth-filled conversation. For Annalise, the ascent was just as rapid, but far more profound. After a weekend of careful consideration, she had accepted Robert Chen's offer. She walked into the gleaming downtown offices of Phoenix Holdings, not as a waitress, but as the newly appointed director of the Ethical Innovation Initiative. The contrast with her previous life was stark. Instead of a cramped staff locker, she had a spacious corner office with a view that rivaled the one from Ethelgard's. Instead of a starched uniform, she wore a simple but elegant business suit that felt like both an armor and a liberation. Her colleagues didn't look through her. They looked to her for guidance and expertise. Her first meeting was with Robert Chen himself. He was a man in his 60s with kind eyes and a firm handshake, the antithesis of Harrison Blackwood. "Annalise," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "I want to be clear about why you're here. The world is full of intelligent people. It is full of economists and financial analysts. What is rare is wisdom. The wisdom to know that how you make money is just as important as how much you make. Your father had that wisdom, and from everything I've seen, so do you." He slid a file across the polished table. "This is our first project for the new division. It's a portfolio of startups working on everything from sustainable agriculture to affordable medical diagnostics. I want you to vet them. Find the ones that have the potential to change the world for the better. Find the next Schmidt Biosolutions, and this time let's make sure we protect it." As Annalise opened the file, she saw a list of names and ideas, brimming with hope and ingenuity. It felt like coming home. The part of her brain that had been dormant for 3 years, the part that loved data and complex systems sparked back to life. But now it was tempered with the hard-won wisdom of her experience. She would look not just at the balance sheets, but at the people behind them. She would listen not just to what they said, but to how they said it. Her first major act as director was a personal one. Using her newfound resources and connections, she initiated legal proceedings to reacquire the patents for her father's water purification technology. Blackwood Capital, now in disarray and desperate to shed its toxic assets, settled almost immediately, selling them back for a fraction of their true worth. Annalise established a foundation in her father's name, placing the patents in a public trust to be licensed at low cost to developing nations. Her father's life's work would finally serve the good of humanity, just as he had always intended. One evening, about a month into her new role, Annalise found herself working late. As she packed her briefcase, she looked out her office window at the sprawling tapestry of city lights. Far below, nestled amongst the skyscrapers, she could just make out the warm glow of Ethelgard's. She thought of the girl she had been, the ghost in the gilded cage, moving silently with her grief. She had thought that strength meant enduring the pain, hiding it away. She realized now that true strength was speaking it aloud, no matter the cost. She had not set out for revenge. Revenge was a fire that consumed everything. What she had achieved was something more lasting: justice. And from the ashes of that confrontation, something new and beautiful was rising. Her father's legacy was secure. Her own future, once a bleak landscape of obligation, was now a horizon of limitless possibility. She turned off the light in her office, leaving the city to its nightly glitter. She was no longer a waitress serving the powerful. She was one of them now, but on her own terms, guided by a different set of values. Annalise Schmidt was finally free, not just from her past, but to build a better future. The ghost of Ethelgard's had found her voice, and it was a voice that would now help shape the world. 6 months passed. The chill of autumn gave way to the deep freeze of winter, and with the changing of the seasons, the landscape of Annalise's life transformed completely. She was no longer defined by the trauma of her past, but by the promise of the future she was actively building. At Phoenix Holdings, she wasn't just an employee. She was a force. She moved with a quiet, earned confidence, her intelligence no longer a hidden weapon, but a tool she used daily to construct, to nurture, and to empower. Her first major success was the funding of Viridian Dynamics, a small startup founded by 2 brilliant but underfunded engineers who had developed a biodegradable polymer to replace single-use plastics. Annalise had seen past their shaky presentation and into the heart of their science, recognizing the same spark of world-changing potential her father had possessed. She championed their cause within Phoenix, structuring a deal that gave them the capital they needed without sacrificing their mission. The project was a resounding success, earning praise from environmental groups and positioning Phoenix Holdings at the forefront of the green tech revolution. Robert Chen had taken to calling her the architect, because she didn't just find innovation, she built the frameworks for it to thrive. The news about Harrison Blackwood became background noise, a distant echo of a battle long won. He was mired in legal proceedings, his fortune bleeding away in lawyers' fees and SEC fines. His name was a punchline in financial circles, a cautionary tale about hubris. Annalise felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only a detached sense of an equation finally being balanced. Her focus was on building, not destroying. One crisp Tuesday afternoon, an email landed in her inbox that pierced the calm of her new reality. The sender's name was Garrett Vance. Annalise stared at the name, a phantom ache of memory surfacing. She remembered his sycophantic laughter, his pale, panicked face in the restaurant. She almost deleted the email, but a sense of unresolved curiosity stayed her hand. She opened it. The message was short-stripped of the corporate jargon he had once spouted. Ms. Schmidt, I know you have no reason to read this, let alone respond. I am not writing to ask for forgiveness, as I know I have no right to it. I am writing to ask for 5 minutes of your time. There are things I feel I must say to you in person, not as an excuse, but as an explanation. I will be at the coffee shop on the corner of your building, the Daily Grind, tomorrow at 1 p.m. If you do not come, I will understand completely, and will not bother you again. Sincerely, Garrett Vance. Her first instinct was to refuse. Why dredge up the ugliest night of her life? But as she considered it, she realized this wasn't about him. It was about her. It was about closing the final chapter, about understanding the full anatomy of the system that had victimized her family. She needed to see what became of the men who weren't titans, but merely the men who propped them up. The next day she walked into the daily grind. Garrett was sitting at a small table in the back, and he was nearly unrecognizable. The sharp suit was gone, replaced by a frayed sweater. His face was gaunt, his eyes shadowed with a weariness that went beyond simple fatigue. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out. He flinched when he saw her, then stood up, awkwardly. Ms. Schmidt. Annalise. Thank you for coming. I have 5 minutes, Mr. Vance, she said, her tone neutral as she remained standing. He nodded, motioning to the empty chair. Please. She sat her posture straight, her hands folded on the table. I don't know where to start, he began, his voice raspy. I lost everything after that night. My job, my reputation. My fiancée left me. I deserved all of it. For months I was just angry. At Blackwood, at the journalist, even at you. But that was the coward's way out. He looked down at his hands. The truth is, I knew what Blackwood was. I knew the North Star deal was rotten. I saw how he operated, how he enjoyed the cruelty, and I went along with it. I admired it. I wanted to be him. I told myself it was just business, that people like your father were just unfortunate but necessary collateral damage on the path to success. He finally looked up, and Annalise saw tears welling in his eyes. What I want to say is, I'm sorry. I am sorry for my part in what happened to your father. I'm sorry for what I said, what I thought, and what I failed to do. I was a ghoul feeding on the scraps of a monster's table. And I needed to say that to you face to face. Annalise listened, her expression unreadable. She had expected excuses, pleas, a desperate attempt at manipulation. She had not expected this raw, pathetic confession. She saw in him not a villain, but a profound and tragic failure of character. Why tell me this now? She asked quietly. Because I have to start over, he said. And I can't build anything new on a foundation of lies. I'm working a stocking job in a warehouse in Queens. It's honest work. It's quiet. It gives me a lot of time to think. And I realized that the only person I was truly fooling back then was myself. Annalise was silent for a long moment. She could destroy him with a few cold words. She could walk away and leave him in his self-pity. But that was Blackwood's way. That wasn't hers. Redemption isn't about getting forgiveness from those you've wronged, Mr. Vance. She said, her voice softer now, but no less firm. It's a debt you pay to yourself. You don't fix the past by apologizing for it. You atone for it by what you do next. Find a way to do some good. It doesn't have to be grand. Just be a better man than you were. That's the only apology that will ever matter. She stood up. I wish you peace, Mr. Vance. With that, she turned and walked out, leaving him with her final unexpected gift, a roadmap not to her forgiveness, but to his own salvation. That evening, Annalise made a reservation. She walked into Ethelgard's not through the staff entrance, but through the grand front doors. She was greeted not with the expectation of service, but with the reverence afforded to a legend. Monsieur Dubois himself came forward, his face breaking into a wide, genuine smile. Annalise, it is an honor to have you back. The honor is mine, Jean-Pierre, she said, using his first name for the first time. A table for one, please. He didn't hesitate. He led her personally across the plush carpet, past the curious eyes of the new wave of patrons, and seated her at the prime corner table. Her table. As she sat there looking out at the same city lights, she felt the last vestiges of the ghost she once was fade away. She was the architect of her own world now. She ordered a simple, elegant meal and a glass of Sancerre. She ate slowly, savoring every bite, not as a former waitress in awe, but as a woman who knew her own worth. Her meal was a silent celebration of her journey. It was an homage to her father, a reclamation of a space that had once been the site of her deepest humiliation, and a toast to the boundless future. When the check came, she paid it, leaving a generous tip for the young waitress, who served her a girl with bright, hopeful eyes, who reminded Annalise just a little of herself. This story is a powerful reminder that there is often more to people than meets the eye. Behind a uniform or a job title, there can be a wealth of experience, intelligence, and untold stories. Annalise's journey shows us that dignity isn't something that can be taken away by contempt or arrogance. It's something we claim for ourselves. Her courage to speak her truth in the face of overwhelming power didn't just expose a cruel man. It unlocked her own potential and reclaimed her father's legacy. It's a testament to the idea that one voice speaking with conviction can indeed change the world, or at least their small corner of it. If this story of resilience, justice, and the triumphant power of the human spirit resonated with you, please help us share more stories like it. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that will inspire and move you. Thank you for listening. The hush that fell over Le Papillon, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants, was deafening. Waiters froze mid-step diners, set down their forks, and the pianist stopped playing mid-note. All eyes turned to the corner table where an impeccably dressed billionaire glared at the trembling waitress. His booming voice cut through the air, demanding perfection, belittling her efforts and seething with impatience. No one dared speak up, until the waitress looked him dead in the eye. A single sentence slipped from her lips, words so unexpected, so arresting, that they seemed to halt time itself. In that moment, lives would forever change. Sophia Jenkins had never been the type to seek out drama. She was 28, juggling 2 jobs, a mountain of student loan debt, and a spirited 7-year-old daughter named Kiki, who constantly begged for dance lessons. But this was life in New York City. When Sophia was offered a part-time position at Le Papillon, a Michelin-starred establishment perched in the heart of Manhattan, she leaped at the chance. The tips alone could keep her afloat in a city where money flowed in torrents, but rarely settled among the working class. Nestled on the upper floor of an elegant pre-war building, Le Papillon was known for its French-Asian fusion menu and an unspoken dress code that turned away even the slightest breach of formality. The staff wore crisp black and white uniforms with embroidered lapels, and each employee was trained to an impeccable standard. Head chef Corinne Lemaire had once worked under a renowned chef in Paris, and rumor had it that celebrities like Beyoncé and even Bill Gates had stopped in for discreet meals. The pressure that came with such clientele was extraordinary, yet Sophia believed the job was worth it. The pay was decent, the tips potentially life-changing, and the environment polished. As a single mother with unstoppable determination, she braced herself for the challenge. Each day, Sophia arrived 2 hours before her shift to help set up meticulously, aligning silverware, wiping down wine glasses until they shone like diamonds under the chandeliers, and memorizing every nuance of the day's menu. She learned that if the chef de cuisine was in a sour mood, the staff had to be 2 steps ahead of any requests. If the sommelier had a special recommendation, they had to be ready to describe it flawlessly. Everything mattered: how you walked, how you held a plate, how you spoke to each diner. She was exhausted, but oddly satisfied at the end of every shift. Something about delivering a perfect service invigorated her. She likened it to a dance routine, every step and gesture choreographed, every phrase of speech practiced, every smile genuine yet carefully measured. Within weeks, Sophia found her stride. She charmed couples, celebrating anniversaries, corporate groups, toasting deals, and wealthy out-of-towners wanting a taste of luxury. She was thrilled when her first big tip arrived, a neat $200 from a hedge fund manager who appreciated her knowledge of vintage Bordeaux. That tip went straight into Kiki's Dance Dreams piggy bank. Outside of the restaurant, Sophia's world was decidedly more modest. Her tiny queen's apartment was a Kiki 1-bedroom, where Kiki slept in a corner, partitioned off by a lavender curtain. The living room doubled as the dining space, and the kitchen was barely big enough to spin around in. Yet they made the most of it, filling each corner with drawings of princesses and pictures of exotic places they planned to visit one day. Despite the challenges, Sophia was determined to provide her daughter with a life that stretched beyond meager paychecks and cramped quarters. This new job at Le Papillon felt like a step in the right direction. So when she clocked in that fateful Saturday evening, she had no idea that her life was about to change. It was a busy night, reservations fully booked with what the maitre d' described as influential figures. This usually meant CEOs, high-profile attorneys, or maybe even a celebrity under a baseball cap. The entire staff was on high alert, as rumors were swirling that a notable billionaire might make an appearance. Chef Lemaire fretted in the kitchen, triple-checking fresh ingredients flown in from across the globe. The sous chefs prepped dishes with a precision that bordered on surgical. That was the night Ethan Caldwell strode through the doors of Le Papillon. Known in the media as a reclusive billionaire who rarely granted interviews, Ethan had amassed his fortune in technology, specifically advanced predictive software that governments and corporations coveted. He held the patent for a groundbreaking algorithm used in everything from stock market analysis to facial recognition. Tabloids had a field day whenever he was spotted reporting on everything from his choice of suits to the mysterious women occasionally seen at his side. Some called him the next Jeff Bezos, others the new Steve Jobs. Many described him as brilliant, yet ruthless a man who allegedly valued his time and money above human decency. But to the staff of Le Papillon, he was simply table 9 tonight. And that was all that should matter, at least according to the restaurant's code of conduct. Sophia, having studied the seating chart, knew he was the last-minute VIP addition, the kind who might drop 4 figures on a bottle of wine without blinking. She wasn't assigned to serve table 9 at first, but fate has a funny way of intervening. Chapter 2. A tense encounter approx. 800 words. The restaurant buzzed like a hive on the brink of chaos. Waiters circled the dining floor like choreographed dancers, swift, silent, and efficient. Every seat was filled. The clink of glasses, the rustle of napkins, and the quiet hum of polite conversation intermingled with the subdued notes of live piano music. Sophia's section for the night was originally tables 5, 4, 6, and 7, none of them especially important. Table 5 was a couple celebrating their 20th wedding anniversary. Table 6 was occupied by a solitary diner who was more interested in reading his thick biography of Winston Churchill than in socializing. Table 7 was a small group of art dealers, politely discussing an upcoming auction. Sophia had just successfully delivered amuse-bouche, a trio of delicate canapés, to each table without incident. So far, so good. Then came the surprise. Julian, the waiter assigned to table 9, slipped in the kitchen. It happened so fast. He was carrying a tray of champagne flutes, headed for the VIP section, when a stray garnish of microgreens fell to the floor, causing him to lose his footing. Julian tumbled, flutes and champagne crashing in a spectacular sparkling arc. He twisted his ankle badly. The maitre d' rushed in, anxious and pale, while Chef Lemaire let out an audible gasp from behind the pass. In that frantic moment, the maitre d' scanned the restaurant for a suitable replacement. Another server had just started her break. Another was bogged down with a 12 top in the opposite corner. His gaze landed on Sophia. "Sophia," he said quickly, "you're up." She blinked, heart pounding. She was nervous, but the unspoken rule at Le Papillon was unyielding. You never question an order, especially in front of guests. She nodded curtly, found an open tray, and prepared herself to serve Ethan Caldwell, reclusive billionaire, rumored to be as demanding as he was powerful. Taking a deep breath, she approached table 9. Ethan Caldwell was no older than 45, tall and broad-shouldered with neatly styled salt and pepper hair. He wore a custom-tailored navy suit with a subtle pinstripe that probably cost more than a year of Sophia's rent. His wrist sported a watch that gleamed with understated opulence, something Swiss, no doubt. Next to him sat a business associate, slighter in build, equally well-dressed, whose name Sophia would later learn was Aaron Welsh. Surrounding them were 2 bodyguards seated at separate tables, attempting to be inconspicuous, but failing miserably, given their matching black suits and earpieces. Sophia approached, posture-aligned, eyes calm. A faint smile etched on her lips. "Good evening," she said, voice steady. "Welcome to Le Papillon. My name is Sophia, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. May I start you with our signature cocktails, or would you prefer to see the wine list?" Ethan glanced at her, barely acknowledging her presence. She could see the flicker of annoyance in his steel-grey eyes, presumably due to the minor commotion with the champagne fiasco. Aaron Welsh offered a polite smile, but Ethan said nothing. "Wine list," he muttered. "Make it quick, and if you have a good vintage of Riesling, bring that." He didn't look up from his phone fingers flying across the screen. Sophia nodded and hurried to fetch the wine list, ignoring the knot forming in her stomach. She reminded herself that as a server, her job was to remain calm, professional, and gracious no matter who sat at the table. This was the unwritten credo she and her colleagues lived by daily. Be invisible when needed, be supportive when invited, and always maintain composure. She took a mental note to check the cellar for the recommended Riesling that Chef Lemaire had raved about. Perhaps it might please him and brighten his mood. Returning to table 9, she carefully offered the list. "We have an excellent Riesling from the Mosel Valley," she suggested in her best polite tone. "It's a 2001 vintage, quite rare, with notes of peach apricot and a mineral finish. Head chef Corinne Lemaire speaks highly of it. I think it would pair beautifully with tonight's specials." Ethan paused, then tossed the wine list aside as if it were a distraction. He hadn't once made direct eye contact yet. "Fine. Bring it," he snapped. "But let's not waste time with the cheap stuff. I can pay for quality." Sophia nodded, forced a mild smile, and stepped away. In the brief moment she spent fetching the bottle and retrieving the correct glassware, she felt a pang of anxiety. There was nothing unusual about demanding guests, some even borderline hostile. But there was an aura around Ethan Caldwell, an electricity in the air that made her uneasy. Perhaps it was his wealth or the swirl of rumors about his intimidating personality, or maybe just the fact that she was new to serving high-profile clients at Le Papillon. Either way, she knew one misstep could lead to a nightmarish shift. She meticulously carried out the bottle presentation, showing Ethan the label. He waved it off impatiently, allowing her to pour a small sample. He took a sip, pursed his lips, and nodded curtly. So far, so good. When she attempted to describe the evening's specials, though, he cut her off mid-sentence. "Stop wasting my time with pleasantries," he said sharply. "Can we just order? I have a meeting in 20 minutes. Bring me the Wagyu beef seared rare black garlic sauce on the side. No garnish and a side of truffle mashed potatoes. Make it happen quickly." Her heart quickened. Le Papillon prided itself on elegant plating, all meticulously arranged with garnishes and accompaniments. But she had no choice. "Of course, sir," she said, keeping her face neutral. Turning to Aaron Welsh, she politely inquired what he'd like to order. He looked deeply uncomfortable, as though he disliked the tension, but was used to following Ethan's lead. He ordered a bouillabaisse and politely thanked her. As Sophia disappeared into the kitchen to place their orders, she felt the tension throbbing in her chest. Other staff members whispered about the scene at Table 9. Chef Lemaire was particularly anxious personally tending to Ethan Caldwell's meal, wanting to ensure that if this rumored billionaire ever decided to invest in a new gastronomic venture, Le Papillon would be the first on his list. Unbeknownst to her, the real drama was only just beginning. While Ethan Caldwell sipped his prized Riesling, the rest of Le Papillon's dining room remained a swirl of refined activity. Waiters delicately balanced silver-domed trays. The pianist's melodic tunes floated on the air, and well-heeled patrons murmured amongst themselves. Yet there was an undercurrent of tension creeping outward from Table 9, like ripples on a pond. Sophia was busy checking on her other tables. She refilled a glass of champagne for the anniversary couple, answered a question about sauce pairings for the art dealers, and politely asked the solo diner if he'd like dessert. Despite juggling multiple requests, she couldn't escape the looming sense of dread. She knew she would have to return to Ethan Caldwell's table soon, and her stomach twisted at the thought. When Chef Lemaire rang the bell indicating that Table 9's dishes were ready, Sophia quickly gathered the plates with practiced efficiency. The Wagyu beef glistened expertly, seared with the black garlic sauce in a small ramekin on the side. The truffle mashed potatoes were piped elegantly, though the garnish had been omitted as requested. Chef Lemaire had not been pleased, but Ethan's demands were absolute. Beside that sat the bouillabaisse fragrant with saffron tomatoes and delicate pieces of shellfish. Sophia emerged from the kitchen and made her way through the tables, head held high. As she arrived at Table 9, she gently placed the Wagyu before Ethan, then set down the bouillabaisse in front of Aaron Welsh. "I hope you enjoy your meal," she said softly, stepping back to maintain the polite distance required. For a few minutes, Ethan picked up his cutlery and began to eat, ignoring Sophia entirely. She half expected him to bark some complaint about temperature or presentation, but to her surprise, he seemed too absorbed in his own thoughts to speak. Instead, she watched Aaron's discreet nod, acknowledging the quality of the bouillabaisse, and felt slightly relieved. But just when she thought she might skate through the service unscathed, Ethan's face hardened. He set down his fork, leaned back in his chair, and pushed the plate away in an abrupt gesture. "Waitress," he barked, looking directly at Sophia for the first time. Her heart lurched at his commanding tone, but she approached, maintaining a calm demeanor. "Yes, sir," she answered, trying not to let her apprehension show. Ethan gestured to the steak, his expression stormy. "This is raw," he snarled. "I asked for rare, not raw. Are you trying to give me food poisoning or something?" Sophia swallowed hard. She knew for a fact that Chef Lemaire's cooking was impeccable. The internal temperature of that Wagyu would have been precisely what Ethan had asked for. But a server never argues in front of a guest. "I'm sorry to hear that, sir," she said, voice measured. "I can have it taken back to the kitchen and cooked further to your liking." He let out a mirthless laugh loud enough to turn a few heads at nearby tables. "Cooked further, I shouldn't have to repeat myself. This place is supposed to be top tier. You should know how to serve a steak properly." Sophia breathed in and out, steady. She reminded herself of little Kiki back home, of the rent that needed paying, of the tips she relied on. "I understand," she said softly. "Let me fix this for you immediately, Chef Lemaire." "Well, I don't want excuses," Ethan snapped. "I want solutions, now. And while you're at it, bring another bottle of that Riesling. And hurry." Aaron Welsh glanced at Sophia apologetically, but he said nothing. The tension in the dining area thickened. Nearby patrons shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to keep watching or pretend they hadn't noticed. Sophia felt her cheeks flush, but kept her posture poised. "Yes, sir," she said, lifting the plate and turning to leave. Only then did the billionaire raise his voice to address the rest of the restaurant. "For a place like this to mess up a simple steak is ridiculous. Do you realize how much money is spent to dine here? You'd think they'd hire competent staff." A hush fell among the diners as Ethan's outburst reverberated against the elegantly paneled walls. Murmurs rose among the crowd. Aaron placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, trying to calm him, but Ethan shrugged him off. Sophia's ears burned. It was one thing to be berated quietly, but quite another to be humiliated publicly. Her composure slipped for a moment, a flash of hurt crossing her face. However, years of hardship had taught her to remain calm under provocation. She disappeared into the kitchen, asked Chef Lemaire to cook the steak just a tad longer, and retrieved another bottle of Riesling. The chef was furious at Ethan's accusation of rawness and questioned if the man even understood what rare meant. Still, their hands were tied. The customer was always right, especially a billionaire who could make or break reputations. Sophia returned with the updated Wagyu and the new bottle, carefully displaying it for Ethan's approval. He gave no sign of courtesy, merely lifting his glass for a refill as she poured. Tension lines creased his forehead, and his voice dripped with disdain. She set the steak in front of him. "I hope this is to your satisfaction," she said, biting back any edge in her tone. He glowered at her, but cut into the meat. He took a bite, then nodded curtly. Finally, he muttered. Then he added, "You should have done it right the first time." His voice echoed. A few patrons stared openly now, while others pretended to be absorbed in their meals. The pianist continued playing more softly, more hesitantly, trying in vain to maintain the ambience. Ethan's eyes flicked up at Sophia. "Well, what are you waiting for? You can go." She inclined her head and stepped away, feeling her pulse racing. Before she could take more than 3 steps, he barked again. "Waitress?" She froze, turning slowly. His phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, reading a text, and then glared at Sophia as though she had personally offended him. "Get me the check, now," he ordered, "and get your manager over here." Sophia's stomach sank. This couldn't be good. She hurried to the maitre d', who immediately tensed at the request. Managers rarely appeared tableside unless there was a major issue, and for a VIP like Ethan Caldwell, damage control had to be swift and thorough. The maitre d' smoothed his jacket and joined Sophia approaching table 9 with careful diplomacy. Ethan wasted no time in ranting about how incompetent the service was, how his steak was subpar, and how his time was wasted. The maitre d' tried to placate him, apologizing profusely and promising to remove the Wagyu from the bill. It was then that the dreaded moment happened. Ethan turned to Sophia, face twisted with scorn, and unleashed an insult-laden tirade that rose above the gentle hum of the dining room. "This waitress is clueless," he fumed. "She can't follow simple instructions. She wasted my evening, brought me raw meat, and I'm paying top dollar. Unacceptable. I don't care if she's new or incompetent. People like her shouldn't be allowed in places like this. I've run companies with thousands of employees, and if any one of them performed like she did tonight, I'd have them fired on the spot." The whole restaurant fell silent. A hush blanketed the dining room, as though someone had hit a pause button on life itself. Every pair of eyes fixed on Ethan Caldwell, stunned by the ferocity of his outburst. The chatter of the other tables died away. Forks and knives clattered to a standstill, and even the pianist's fingers froze on the keys. Aaron Welsh was red-faced, staring down at his half-eaten bouillabaisse, clearly wishing he could melt into the floor. Sophia stood rigid, heart pounding in her ears. Her cheeks burned with both humiliation and anger she struggled to keep in check. The entire staff watched as this towering man verbally pummeled her, telling the world she was worthless, incompetent, a nobody. Something inside Sophia cracked. She had spent years turning the other cheek, dealing with condescending customers who snapped their fingers. Students in her second job as a dance instructor, complaining about fees, even the father of her child who vanished without a trace, leaving her alone to raise Kiki. She had always bottled up her frustrations, swallowing every harsh word and insult, convinced that meek acceptance was the only way to survive. But in this moment, with the entire restaurant gawking at her humiliation, her backbone finally straightened. She lifted her chin, looked Ethan Caldwell square in the eye for the first time that night, and spoke a single sentence that stopped all of Manhattan in its tracks, or so it felt. "You can buy a steak, sir, but you can't buy decency." Her voice was calm, but the words cut through the air like a knife. For a moment it seemed as though her time itself had halted. The words lingered echoing in the silent dining room. Every person within earshot felt the impact of her statement. A wave of shock rippled through the crowd. Even the maitre d' was stunned into momentary silence. Chef Lemaire, peeking from the kitchen, felt her heart jolt with pride and dread all at once. Ethan Caldwell's expression froze. His eyes widened in anger, and a flush crept up his neck. No one spoke to him like this, especially not a waitress. After a stunned beat, he began to splutter. "What? Did you just say?" Sophia's composure held. Her posture was as straight as an arrow, her gaze unflinching. "I said you can buy a steak, but you can't buy decency," she repeated, her voice echoing the calm resolve of someone who had finally had enough. She expected an immediate explosion from him, but instead, the entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath, waiting for his reaction. People slowly emerged from their stunned silence. A few tables began clapping tentatively at first. Then one or two bolder voices joined in, until a soft applause spread across the room like a gentle wave. It was a subtle but tangible show of solidarity with the courageous waitress who had dared to speak her truth. Ethan's face contorted with rage. He stood abruptly, nearly knocking over his chair. The half-eaten steak before him lay forgotten. "How dare you?" he roared. "Do you have any idea who I am? I could buy this entire restaurant and fire you all. I could ruin your life with a single phone call." Sophia swallowed her pulse drumming, but she refused to back down. She was no fool. She knew the risk she had taken by speaking out. She might lose her job, the only stable income she had. But in that moment, her self-respect outweighed her fear. "I'm well aware of who you are, Mr. Caldwell," she said quietly, her voice wavering only slightly. "I also know that doesn't give you the right to treat people like they're disposable." The applause grew louder. A few guests rose to their feet, nodding in agreement. A whirlwind of confusion seized the maitre d'. On one hand, he needed to protect the restaurant's reputation from a furious billionaire. On the other, the moral compass of every person in that room had been rattled by Ethan's vicious behavior. The staff exchanged worried glances, uncertain of how to intervene. Ethan Caldwell's breathing was heavy. He jerked his gaze from Sophia to the maitre d' to the onlookers around him, all of whom were either silently watching or openly showing support for the waitress. It was a surreal moment, a standoff between an exceedingly wealthy man and a courageous woman who'd had enough of being trampled upon. "Your manager," Ethan hissed, turning to the maitre d'. Now the maitre d' stepped forward, hands held out in a conciliatory gesture. "Mr. Caldwell, please accept our apologies for any—" Ethan silenced him with a raised hand. "I'm done," he said, his voice seething with anger. "I won't spend another minute here. This is unacceptable. Do you realize what a public relations nightmare this is for me? I'll see to it that this establishment suffers." "And you," he snarled at Sophia. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." Without waiting for the check, he tossed a wad of cash onto the table, far exceeding the bill apparently, and grabbed his phone. Aaron Welsh quickly scrambled after him, whispering apologies to the stunned staff. The two bodyguards who had stood abruptly when Ethan shouted followed their employer out the door, leaving the entire restaurant in a hushed state of disbelief. Sophia stood rooted to the spot, her entire body shaking from the adrenaline rush. Had she really just done that? The weight of her words hit her, and she wondered if she had gone too far. She might have lost her job. The cost of that rebellious sentence might spell financial disaster. But deep down, an ember of pride glowed in her chest. She'd spoken truth to power, even if it would cost her everything. Chapter 5. After the storm, approx. 800 words. The echo of Ethan Caldwell's threats lingered in the dining room long after he stormed out. People began to whisper to one another, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others stealing glances at Sophia, who remained standing near table 9, the cash scattered across the table like unwanted confetti. It was only then that she realized her eyes were brimming with tears. The stress, the fear, and the triumph of that single moment overwhelmed her. Before she could wipe her eyes, the maitre d' stepped forward, followed closely by Chef Lemaire, who had emerged from the kitchen. "Sophia," he said gently, pressing a hand to her shoulder. "Are you okay?" She swallowed hard and nodded, blinking away the tears. "I'm sorry," she managed. "I don't know what came over me." Chef Lemaire spoke up, her voice tinged with both concern and admiration. "What came over you was the courage to stand up to a bully, chérie. I'm proud of you for speaking your truth. But we have to be prepared for the consequences. Sophia's heart sank. I understand if you need to let me go, she murmured. I spoke out of turn. I was unprofessional. Let's not make any rash decisions, the maitre d' interjected. You did what you felt was right. If Mr. Caldwell makes good on his threats, we'll have to deal with it then. But for now, take a few minutes to collect yourself. One of the buses stepped up to clear the table, but the maitre d' raised his hand. No, he said, eyeing the pile of cash Ethan had flung down. We'll handle that carefully. The check was never finalized. This is complicated. Sophia, too shaken to deal with the financial logistics of the situation, nodded. I'll step outside for a moment. She made her way to the back exit, escaping into the alley, where the restaurant disposed of its trash. Under the soft glow of a single street lamp, she leaned against the cold brick wall and inhaled the crisp night air. Her mind whirled with 100 questions. How would she pay her bills if she lost this job? What about Kiki's dance lessons? Had she just shattered her future with one impulsive sentence? Yet amidst the swirl of fear, she felt an undeniable relief. For once, she hadn't just swallowed her dignity. She'd stood up for herself, and by proxy, for every server, cashier, receptionist, or sales clerk who had ever been dehumanized by someone wielding wealth as a weapon. She was startled by a gentle voice. Sophia. Turning, she found one of her co-workers, a fellow waitress named Marta, hovering in the doorway. Marta, a kind soul in her early 40s, had been at Le Papillon for years. She offered Sophia a comforting smile. Some of the customers asked for you, Marta said softly. They wanted to thank you for what you did. Thank me, Sophia asked, surprised. But I probably just ruined the restaurant's reputation and my own. Marta shrugged. You said what everyone was thinking. The way he treated you was awful. He was acting like he owned the world. A lot of us have been there dealing with entitled customers. It's refreshing to see someone push back. Sophia exhaled, shaky but somewhat reassured. She gave a small nod. I'll be back in, but I need a minute. Can you let the maitre d' know? Of course, Marta said, with a supportive smile. Then she ducked back inside, leaving Sophia to gather her thoughts in solitude. As she stood there in the crisp air, she thought of Kiki. Her daughter had always looked up to her proud that her mother was a dancer and a hard-working waitress. Sophia tried to imagine explaining her actions to Kiki. Could she say Mommy lost her job because she wouldn't let a mean man talk down to her? A tear slipped down her cheek, and she brushed it away, steeling herself. If she had to start over, she would. But at least she had looked that bully in the eye and refused to let him trample her spirit. Eventually, she returned to the dining room. Though she felt drained and hollow, she put on a professional face to finish her shift. She apologized to the anniversary couple for the disturbance, but they were gracious, telling her she was an inspiration for standing up for herself. The art dealers expressed similar sentiments. Even the solitary diner paused his reading long enough to slip her an extra tip. Word had obviously spread about what had happened. I'm proud of you, one older woman whispered, gripping Sophia's hand as she left. We need more women who speak their minds. Yet for every supportive gesture, there was an undercurrent of tension among the staff. Everyone wondered how the owners would react when they heard about the scene. Would they side with the young waitress who risked the restaurant's good graces with an influential billionaire? Or would they do damage control at her expense? By the end of the night, as the last table was cleared and the doors were locked. Sophia felt emotionally spent. She dragged herself into the staff locker room to change, half expecting the maitre d' to appear and hand her a pink slip. But he never came. Instead, the only person who entered was Chef Lemaire. "C'est chérie," she said, gesturing to the small bench against the wall. "I wanted to speak with you before you went home." Sophia sank onto the bench, her stomach churning with anxiety. Chef Lemaire sat beside her, a sympathetic expression softening her usually stern features. "Sophia," she began, "you made quite the impression tonight. Many of our regulars are already telling me how deeply they respect you. And I do too." A lump formed in Sophia's throat. "Thank you. That means a lot. But what about Ethan Caldwell? His threats weren't empty. He's one of the wealthiest men in the city. He could ruin Le Papillon's reputation or sue us," or Chef Lemaire nodded gravely. "We'll see what happens. For now, management hasn't asked for your resignation, and as far as I know, they're not planning to. In fact, the maitre d' hinted that the owners might want to take a different approach. There's a lot of support for you, more than you might realize. I suggest you go home, rest, and wait to hear from them tomorrow." Relief washed over Sophia, though she couldn't fully relax. "Thank you, Chef," she whispered, tears brimming again. The older woman patted her hand. "Go home. Hug your daughter. Tomorrow's another day, and we'll face it together if need be." Sophia nodded, packed up her things, and left the restaurant. She hopped on the subway back to Queens, her mind still spinning. As she looked out at the flickering tunnel lights, she couldn't help but think about the consequences of her actions. Tomorrow would bring either hope or doom, or maybe both. But for now, she clung to a small sense of victory. She had no idea her words would soon become a viral sensation. When Sophia woke up the next morning, her phone was vibrating incessantly on her bedside table. She groaned, glancing at the clock, 6:30 a.m., an ungodly hour for a Sunday. Sliding her finger across the screen, she saw a barrage of text messages, missed calls, and notifications from social media apps she rarely even opened. Her pulse jumped. What on earth was happening? She unlocked her phone to find a flood of messages, some from co-workers at Le Papillon, others from friends she hadn't spoken to in years, and even from unknown numbers. Words jumped out at her. "OMG, you're trending. Are you okay? That was so brave. Call me ASAP." Her heart hammered as she scrolled through the social media. She was tagged in multiple posts. One particular video shaky footage from a patron's phone showed Ethan Caldwell berating her in the restaurant, then captured the pivotal moment when she uttered the sentence that left the room stunned. "You can buy a steak, sir, but you can't buy decency." The clip ended with Ethan's outraged departure, followed by the applause that spread through the dining room. Already the video had hundreds of thousands of views on Twitter and Instagram, with comments pouring in at breakneck speed. Finally, someone stood up to that jerk billionaire, go Waitress, and respect. "I want to find her and give her a medal. Ethan Caldwell is a known tyrant. Good for her." There were detractors, too, who insisted Sophia was out of line, that a server should never speak to a patron like that, especially someone who could ruin their life. But the majority seemed overwhelmingly supportive. Hashtags like #HatYouCan'tBuy. Decency trended throughout the morning. Sophia felt dizzy with anxiety. She had never asked for this kind of attention. What if the owners of Le Papillon saw it and decided she was a liability, What if Ethan Caldwell launched a defamation lawsuit? She was just a single mom trying to make ends meet, not a freedom fighter ready to battle a tech titan. Still in her pajamas, she paced the narrow living room, while Kiki, still half asleep, wandered out of her makeshift bedroom. Rubbing her eyes, her daughter asked Mommy, "Why are you up so early?" Sophia plastered on a smile. "Don't worry about it, sweet pea," she said, kissing her on the forehead. "How about I make us some pancakes before we do anything else today?" Kiki's eyes lit up. "Yes, please, with chocolate chips." "Of course," Sophia said softly. While she whisked the batter, her phone continued buzzing on the countertop. She received a call from Marta, who sounded breathless. "You have no idea what's going on," Marta exclaimed. "The owners just called an emergency meeting with the entire staff for noon today. Rumor has it reporters are calling the restaurant non-stop trying to get your name. It's crazy." Sophia's stomach sank. "Do you think they'll fire me?" Marta hesitated. "I don't know. But I do know we're all rooting for you. Customers have been calling too, praising what you did. Hang in there." Sophia thanked her and set the phone aside, focusing on flipping pancakes as if her life depended on it. After breakfast, she dressed Kiki and brought her to her friend Lydia's place, who often watched Kiki when Sophia had short-notice obligations. She confided in Lydia about the situation, and Lydia, always the optimist, reassured her that everything would work out. It was with trembling hands and a racing heart that Sophia arrived at Le Papillon just before noon. A small throng of reporters and cameramen hovered outside the entrance, brandishing microphones and cameras. She recognized the logos of local news stations, and her chest tightened with dread. How had this spiraled so quickly? One of the reporters spotted her. Miss, is it true you're the waitress who stood up to Ethan Caldwell? Can you tell us what happened?" Sophia lowered her gaze and attempted to slip past them. She didn't want to make any statement that could worsen her situation. The maitre d' was at the door, ushering her in quickly. "Good to see you," he murmured. "Just head to the private dining room in the back. The meeting's about to start." Inside, every member of the staff was already seated. Bartenders, servers, chefs, bussers, and hosts. The tension was palpable. At the head of the room stood Franco Moretti, the restaurant's general manager, and Patrice Fontaine, the majority owner of Le Papillon. Sophia had only seen Patrice once before, during a special event. Patrice was a tall, elegant woman in her mid-50s with silver hair twisted into a sleek chignon. Her posture exuded confidence, and her cool blue eyes commanded the room's attention. When Sophia entered, heads turned and she felt a flush creep up her neck. She quietly slipped into a seat near the back. Franco cleared his throat and began, "Thank you all for coming in on short notice. As you're all probably aware by now, a video involving an incident at our restaurant last night has gone viral. While this has put our establishment under sudden media scrutiny, we need to address this situation professionally and collaboratively." He glanced at Patrice, who stepped forward. "Le Papillon has always prided itself on excellence," she said, her voice clear. "Not just in our cuisine, but also in our service. However, we also believe in treating our staff with dignity. We do not condone the mistreatment of our employees by anyone regardless of wealth or influence." A low murmur rippled through the staff. Sophia's heart fluttered at Patrice's statement. Was it possible that the restaurant's management actually stood behind her? Patrice's gaze scanned the room until it found Sophia. "Sophia Jenkins," she said. "Please come forward." A hush fell. Sophia's stomach knotted as she rose from her chair and walked toward the front of the room, aware that every eye followed her. Sophia Patrice began. "I've been informed of the details surrounding last night's event. We've all seen the footage that's been circulating. While we do not usually encourage public confrontations with guests, your response to Mr. Caldwell's verbal abuse has sparked a much-needed conversation about the respect and value of service workers. As the owner of Le Papillon, I believe it is crucial to stand by my staff when they have been attacked unjustly." Sophia swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you, Ms. Fontaine. I truly appreciate that. I never intended to cause a scene or bring negative press to the restaurant. You spoke truth," Patrice interrupted gently. "I've already been in contact with our legal team in case Mr. Caldwell decides to pursue legal action, which we doubt he will. The public sentiment appears to be in your favor, and any lawsuit on his part would likely cause him more damage in the court of public opinion." Relief coursed through Sophia. She hadn't realized just how tense she was until that moment. Does that mean I still have a job?" Patrice's lip curved in a wry smile. "Yes, Sophia, you still have a job. In fact, we'd like to highlight your dedication and poise amid extreme circumstances. However, we must be cautious with the media. We don't want to provoke Mr. Caldwell or inflame the situation. If you receive any press inquiries, direct them to our public relations department." "Understood." Sophia nodded, tears threatening to spill. "Yes. Thank you so much. I won't let you down." Patrice patted her hand, then addressed the staff. "For now, if any of you are approached by reporters, please refrain from giving statements. Direct them to Piro Kuho. We will release a formal statement soon. Let's remember that we're a team, and we will treat each other and our patrons with the utmost respect." The staff applauded quietly, and Franco ended the meeting shortly after. While a wave of employees came to congratulate or hug Sophia, she stood in a haze of relief and lingering anxiety. She'd been granted a reprieve, but she knew the story was far from over. Ethan Caldwell might still retaliate, and the world's attention was on her. Still, for the first time in her life, Sophia felt seen not as an invisible waitress to be stepped on, but as a person with a voice and dignity that could not be bought at any price. In the days that followed, Sophia's life transformed in ways she never could have anticipated. The formal statement issued by Le Papillon was measured and firm. They stood behind their employee, denounced harassment, and assured the public that they would continue to offer world-class dining without compromising the dignity of their staff. This approach ignited a flurry of supportive messages on social media. Her face, captured mid-sentence in that grainy cell phone video, became a symbol of standing up against toxic entitlement. Hashtags multiplied. Memes appeared. Late-night show hosts joked about Ethan Caldwell's meltdown. A satirical article in The Onion teased Billionaire outraged that Waitress expects basic courtesy, spends $10 million on etiquette book to prove point. Amid the frenzy calls and emails flooded the restaurant, many from journalists requesting interviews. Following Patrice's advice, Sophia politely deflected them all, forwarding inquiries to the PR department. She tried to maintain her normal routine, taking Kiki to school, working her shifts, dancing with the small group of students she taught on weekends. But it was surreal to navigate the swirling media storm while attempting to appear calm for her daughter's sake. Then one late afternoon, as Sophia was finishing an early shift, the maitre d' approached her with a bemused expression. "Sophia," he said, "there's someone here to see you. He says he's a friend of the owner and has a few words of support." Patrice approved it. She glanced around. "Who is it?" He jerked a thumb toward a discreet corner of the bar area where a tall man in a grey blazer stood with his hands clasped. He wore simple jeans and stylish sneakers, and though he tried to look incognito, the face was unmistakable. Sophia blinked, certain she was hallucinating. It was Bill Gates. She nearly dropped the tray she was carrying. The Bill Gates. The Microsoft co-founder, billionaire, philanthropist, and tech icon, just standing casually in Le Papillon's bar area, waiting to talk to her. Are you serious?" she breathed. The maitre d' nodded wide-eyed. "Yes." He said Patrice is an old acquaintance of his, and he heard about what happened here. Her mind spun. Why would Bill Gates want to talk to her? She was just a waitress. Gathering her courage, she approached him. Up close, he looked surprisingly down to earth, wearing a kind smile behind unassuming glasses. "Mr. Gates," she managed, her voice tinged with awe. I'm Sophia Jenkins." He extended a hand. "Nice to meet you, Sophia," he said warmly. "I hope I didn't cause you any trouble by dropping in. I just wanted to offer some words of encouragement. Patrice told me about the incident with Ethan Caldwell." He paused, adjusting his glasses. "Sometimes people with wealth forget about humanity. You, on the other hand, reminded the world that decency is priceless." Sophia's cheeks flushed. "I don't know what to say. Thank you, but it was all so unexpected. I really wasn't trying to make a point or go viral." He laughed softly. "That's often how these moments happen. But you should know I respect your courage. I've dealt with all kinds of corporate bullies in my career. People forget that power and wealth aren't excuses for bad behavior. When Patrice told me your story, I decided I wanted to meet you, if you were willing." She nodded, hardly believing this was real. I appreciate that more than I can express. But aren't you worried about being seen here? The press might." He lifted a hand, stopping her. "I'm not here to stoke any controversy. I'm just here to say that not everyone with money is like Ethan Caldwell, and you shouldn't let his actions define how you see people with resources. I also hope you won't let his threats intimidate you. There are many of us who admire your backbone. Honestly, I wish more people spoke up in situations like that." Before Sophia could respond, Patrice materialized, beaming. She greeted Bill Gates with a friendly kiss on each cheek, then turned to Sophia. "I see you two have met," she said, her voice filled with pride. "Sophia, Bill and I were chatting earlier about a potential philanthropic collaboration. We're looking into how we can help support workers' rights in the hospitality industry. We want to ensure that no one else has to face what you did." A whirlwind of emotions swirled in Sophia's chest. She, a small-town girl from upstate New York, who had come to the city with big dreams of dancing and was now a single mom scraping by, was being told that Bill Gates and Patrice Fontaine wanted to help people like her. It was surreal. "That's incredible," she finally managed. "I never imagined something like this could come out of that awful night." Patrice nodded. "Neither did we. But sometimes adversity shines a spotlight on issues that need addressing. We're going to use this momentum to push for better protections and respect for service workers. And we'd love for you to be involved in some capacity." Sophia blinked, overwhelmed. "Involved?" She couldn't help but laugh nervously. "I'm not really an activist. I told a rude billionaire he couldn't buy decency. That's all." Gates gave a small chuckle. "That one sentence may have changed more than you realize. You see, real social shifts often start with everyday individuals who speak up in one critical moment. And then everyone else realizes they're not alone in how they feel, that they too can speak out. Sophia felt tears prick her eyes again, but this time they were tears of wonder and gratitude. "Well," she said shakily, "if there's anything I can do, share my story, give my perspective, I'd be happy to, especially if it helps others in my position." Patrice and Bill both smiled, exchanging glances. "We'll be in touch," Patrice said, with the details. "But for now, let's celebrate the fact that you're still here, employed, and you've put a spotlight on an important issue." The rest of the conversation felt like a dream. Bill Gates asked about Kiki, about Sophia's dance background, and how she balanced her hectic schedule. He listened intently, displaying genuine curiosity and kindness, exactly the opposite of Ethan Caldwell's brusque entitlement. When he finally left, the entire staff buzzed with excitement. Patrice made sure the encounter remained discreet, letting Bill slip out a side door to avoid the press. Within an hour, Sophia was on her way home, her head spinning. She still had to pick up Kiki from Lydia's and figure out what to make for dinner. But she carried a newfound sense of purpose, buoyed by unexpected allies. The confrontation with Ethan Caldwell had unleashed a wave of trials, but also a current of compassion and activism that she never imagined possible. Over the following weeks, the media frenzy gradually began to subside, replaced by thoughtful conversations about service industry standards. Sophia continued working at Le Papillon, though she noticed an uptick in curious customers who recognized her from the viral video. Some came purely out of curiosity, hoping to catch a glimpse of the famous waitress, but many arrived with genuine admiration, leaving generous tips and encouraging words. One evening, Patrice held a private gathering at Le Papillon, inviting industry leaders, philanthropic personalities, and a few select journalists. The purpose was to launch a new initiative, Project Decency, a foundation aimed at promoting worker protection, anti-harassment training, and empowerment for service employees. Patrice introduced Sophia as the unexpected catalyst for the movement. Standing at the microphone in the softly lit dining room, wearing her black server's uniform, Sophia felt both terrified and exhilarated. She looked out at the crowd, chefs, restaurateurs, activists, even a few celebrities. Bill Gates stood alongside Patrice, nodding in quiet support. Sophia took a deep breath. "Good evening," she began, voice trembling slightly. "I never thought I'd be standing here speaking to a room of such distinguished individuals. A month ago, I was just a waitress trying to provide for my daughter and do my job well. But one night, everything changed. I spoke a single sentence to a powerful man, and it resonated far beyond my station. I've since learned that sometimes it only takes a moment of courage to highlight a systemic issue, one that affects millions of people in the service industry." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I don't stand here to vilify anyone, but I do want to remind everyone that respect is not optional. It's a basic human right. If we can create an environment where no server, cashier, janitor, or housekeeper ever feels powerless against harassment, then we've achieved something far greater than just a viral moment." Applause rose from the audience, gentle but heartfelt. A wave of warmth washed over Sophia, and she smiled, recalling the time she was too shy even to stand up to her dance instructors in college. Now she was speaking to a room filled with influential figures, urging them to promote decency. After the speeches concluded, the event transformed into a cocktail reception. Guests mingled, sampling hors d'oeuvres crafted by Chef Lemaire. Sophia found herself inundated with handshakes and business cards. A high-profile Hollywood actress, known for her activism, told Sophia, "I wish I had your courage when I was working as a waitress in my early days." An older restaurateur in a white suit nodded solemnly and said, "You reminded me why I got into hospitality in the first place, to serve and to respect people." Later, while sipping a tonic water by the bar, Bill Gates approached, giving her a reassuring smile. "Well done," he said. "You handled that speech like a pro." She laughed self-consciously. My legs were shaking the entire time. "Public speaking isn't exactly my thing." He raised an eyebrow good-naturedly. "You seemed at ease. Maybe you're a natural." He then glanced at Patrice, who was engaged in animated conversation with a group of journalists, and lowered his voice. "I wanted to let you know that we, Patrice and I, are considering you for a more formal role in Project Decency. Obviously, this would be your choice entirely. We wouldn't want to pressure you, but we think your authentic voice is incredibly valuable." Sophia's eyes widened. "A role, as in working for the foundation?" He nodded. "Part-time or full-time, whatever you can manage. We know you have responsibilities with your daughter, and we'd never ask you to quit your job at Le Papillon if you don't want to. But we'd like you to be an ambassador, a spokesperson of sorts, traveling with us to speak about worker empowerment. We can provide compensation, of course, and we can adapt the schedule around your availability." Her mind reeled. That sounds amazing, but also terrifying. I've never done anything like that. He offered a kind smile. "Think about it. Talk it over with your loved ones. The offer stands whenever you're ready." With that, he gave her a friendly nod and slipped away. Sophia exhaled her thoughts, spinning. She recalled the day she started at Le Papillon, how anxious yet hopeful she felt. How far she'd come from that moment. Now she had opportunities she never dreamed of, born from a confrontation she never asked for, but one she bravely faced anyway. Across the room, Chef Lemaire caught her eye and winked. The memory of that infamous night flickered Ethan Caldwell shouting, belittling acting, as though he owned the restaurant and every soul in it. She remembered the single sentence she uttered that changed everything. "You can buy a steak, sir, but you can't buy decency." In that moment, she realized she'd stumbled into something far bigger than herself. By the time she got home that night, Kiki was already asleep in bed. Sophia tiptoed in, gently kissed her daughter's forehead, and headed to her cramped living room, where she sank onto the couch. She looked around at the chaos dance shoes by the door, Kiki's crayons scattered on a table, a hamper of laundry waiting for her in the corner. It was a humble life, but it was hers. Her phone buzzed. She checked the screen to see a notification, an email from Patrice, subject line, Project Decency Follow-up. Heart pounding, she opened it. Sophia. Thank you for your wonderful speech tonight. Enclosed is more information about the formal role we'd like to offer you. Please let me know your thoughts. We believe you can make a real difference. Warm regards, Patrice Fontaine. A swirl of hope and apprehension surged through Sophia. She set the phone aside, knowing she needed time to think. Could she truly step into such a role, traveling and speaking publicly? Was it wise to leave or reduce her hours at Le Papillon, an income she still desperately relied on? Yet if this opportunity allowed her to better provide for Kiki and help millions of other service workers, wasn't it worth considering? She couldn't help but smile, remembering her own words. You can buy a steak, sir, but you can't buy decency. That moment of spontaneous bravery had opened a door to a new horizon. She didn't know exactly where the path led, but she felt a surge of confidence pulsing through her. Perhaps, just perhaps, she was discovering a purpose she never imagined. Life, she realized, had a funny way of turning a single sentence into an entire movement. And so ends the story of how a single mum, struggling to make ends meet, found herself at the epicenter of a culture-shifting moment in one of Manhattan's most prestigious restaurants. Sophia's bold stand against a powerful billionaire began as an unexpected clash, but evolved into a clarion call for respect and dignity in the workplace. From viral social media clips to chance encounters with philanthropists like Bill Gates, her journey shows us that one voice, no matter how humble, can spark real change. Will Sophia stay at Le Papillon or join Project Decency full-time? That's a decision she's still weighing. But one thing's clear, she'll never be the same timid waitress who accepted insults quietly. Sometimes it takes just one sentence to reveal who you truly are and transform the world around you. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more dramatic, inspiring tales just like this one. Your support helps us keep creating content that uplifts and entertains. Let us know in the comments what you'd do if you were in Sophia's shoes. And remember, no matter how big or small you feel, your voice matters.